Hi, my name is Vittorio Nastasi. I'm a research project manager with the DeVoe Center, and I'm also a PhD student at the ASU School of Public Administration at FSU. So I recently wrote an op-ed that was published in the Tallahassee Democrat, which recommends that Wakulla County adopt well-designed impact fees that accurately capture the marginal impact of new development. Basically, for context, Wakulla County used to have residential impact fees, but eliminated them in the 2011, or in the wake of the 2008 housing crisis. In the year 2011, they eliminated them. And I think the idea was to avoid any potential barriers to further housing development. They saw it as a way of eliminating a potential cost borne by developers. But in reality, it's created a situation where the existing residents of Wakulla County end up disproportionately bearing the cost of new development. So the op-ed basically just recommended that Wakulla County reconsider their decision to eliminate the impact fees. And in fact, Wakulla County, the County Commission has recently considered initiating a research endeavor to identify how the county might go about implementing impact fees going forward. But after a few cost estimates from potential consultants, they decided not to pursue that study. So as of right now, Wakulla County is not actively pursuing residential impact fees, but it's the recommendation of my op-ed for them to reconsider that choice. So basically my research is looking at how impact fees could be used to offset some of the costs of new development within growing counties. As an undergraduate student at FSU, I was an intern actually with the DeVoe Center at the time. And during my internship, I had the opportunity to work on a policy study that was published by the James Madison Institute, which is another Florida think tank, that was examining the use of impact fees in a handful of Florida counties, trying to draw some best practices on the use of impact fees. Impact fees are basically a form of user fee that allow governments to charge new residents or people moving to new developments for the marginal cost of new development or construction. So new housing development or commercial development will have some impact on the infrastructure needs of a municipality. And so rather than relying on the existing taxpayers, existing residents of a community to pay for those impacts of new development, impact fees capture those costs so that they can be borne by the beneficiaries, the new users being added to the system. So Wakulla County is a neighboring county to Leon County, where we all live here in Tallahassee, where the DeVoe Center is based. And Wakulla has become kind of a suburb of Tallahassee, or a satellite city of Tallahassee. So a lot of people live in Wakulla and commute into Tallahassee for work, and that has helped. Part of the reason for that is because housing is relatively affordable in Wakulla County. The problem is that all of that growth has resulted in costs for the current residents of Wakulla County, and that has generated some pushback from the community when the County Commission has considered adjustments to the comprehensive plan of the county to allow for new development or higher density development in places that weren't initially planned to see residential development. And so the idea is that if impact fees can offset some of the costs that are being borne by existing residents associated with new development, they might actually serve to as a bulwark against more restrictive land use policies, sorts of policies that might be put in place to make it harder for new housing to be built, new people to come into the city, which might be justified by new residents because the impacts of new development do potentially impose some costs on those existing residents in the absence of well-designed impact fees. So right now, Wakulla County doesn't charge any impact fees for residential development. A little over half of Florida counties charge impact fees, and those are primarily charged in counties that have experienced high rates of growth over recent decades. Wakulla County is actually the only county in Florida that has grown by over 10% over the last 10 years and doesn't have any form of impact fees. This would suggest that residents in Wakulla County are disproportionately bearing the cost of the county's growth, which is obviously positive in a lot of ways. There's a lot of economic benefits that come with new residents, but it's important that new residents aren't primarily bearing the cost of new development, especially when it comes to things like infrastructure service costs. First of all, I wouldn't generally advise for any jurisdiction to just adopt impact fees for the sake of adopting impact fees. Part of why impact fees are relevant to Wakulla is because the county is experiencing somewhat rapid growth. It's already, or as it exists, is a fairly rural county, and so there's lots of infrastructure investments that are necessary in order to support a growing population. So I would say that in fast-growing jurisdictions, especially in places where there are a lot of needed infrastructure investments, impact fees might make sense. But it's also important that impact fees be well designed, because when impact fees don't accurately capture the true marginal impact of development, they tend to be somewhat regressive. So if impact fees were treated as flat fees across the board, they would make up a disproportionate share of the cost of a lower priced house relative to a more expensive home. And so when we're thinking about barriers to homeownership or costs associated with housing, it's important to make sure that policies that are intended to alleviate some of the costs that might come with new development, they also need to be well designed in the sense that they don't have disproportionate impacts on people and are able to, maintain housing affordability. We don't want to burden the existing residents of Wakulla County, but it would also be ill-advised to disproportionately burden potential low-income homeowners in Wakulla County. So I think it's important to strike a balance and make sure that the impact fee is actually capturing the marginal cost of development, in which case they're efficient and basically result in a one-for-one impact on price and property values. So they're not imposing undue costs on would-be residents of Wakulla that would end up paying fees. In the course of my research, I was trying to understand why some counties have adopted impact fees while others don't make use of impact fees. And I was somewhat surprised, but maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, to learn that generally the counties that use impact fees are those that are growing the fastest. And in fact, Wakulla County is the only county to have grown by, only county in Florida to have grown by more than 10% over the last decade that doesn't make use of impact fees. And so that would seem to suggest that all of that growth, while clearly beneficial for Wakulla County in many ways, has come at a disproportionate cost to the existing residents of Wakulla County. So adopting impact fees seems like a logical thing for the county to do, given what counties in similar circumstances have chosen to do with impact fees. Oftentimes, impact fees are seen as harmful by particularly contractors or home builders, with the idea being that they essentially raise the cost of new housing construction, right? Because it's a fee that's charged to new development. But those costs are primarily borne by the consumers, the purchasers of the new home, and it's important to recognize that when we aren't capturing those costs, they end up being borne by the other residents, the existing residents of the city, who aren't actually benefiting from the expansion of services to the new development. But there are some things that can be done to make impact fees less harmful, or to address some of the concerns that contractors and home builders might have. One thing is to have impact fees be stable and easily identified and calculated. So it shouldn't be a large administrative hassle for contractors or home builders to figure out what the impact fees are going to be for a particular development. And impact fees should also be held constant at the time which the permit for construction was approved. Because sometimes, or was submitted, I should say, sometimes permitting delays can extend for a long period of time, and in that time, the impact fees might change, and that creates a level of uncertainty for home builders. And so locking in impact fee rates at the time that a permit application is submitted is one way to ensure that contractors aren't harmed in any way by regulatory delays in the permitting process.